Is to find. Okay, we should have the set up slideshow. Well, let me just hold that the way it is for the moment. Our review session, ladies and gentlemen, this evening is to cover the previous 8 sessions as we characteristically do. We do this on the basis of the old archaeological practice of every season after we've looked at, after we've dug for a while, we lay out the artifacts and take a look to see just what is there that's significant, what needs to be talked about. And we've had the sequence from Bruce Van Orden, who talked about George Reynolds, to Bill Morain on the Sword of Laban, Eric Scott, who talked about Glen Scott's book, Ralph Williston on the First Nations traditions that are in the scriptures. Brent Larson is here to share about the Seers, and Frank Stribling shared with us about the gems in the Book of Mormon. So those are the fundamentals that we have to review. But since we're missing Bruce Van Orden and Bill Morain, and those are two of the more interesting and significant ones to review, then let me do some of the reviewing there, and then we'll bring in Boyd and Brent to review their own. But let's begin with our evening prayer together, if you would, please. Such diversity, dear God, you have created. Black holes, galaxies, finches adapted and mated. People with diverse cultures, languages, and ways. Environments adjusted to the length of days. Religions with commonality of the golden rule, yet diverse beliefs, rituals in fire and in pool. And we as humans in your image created, we believe, too, are diverse in how to live, love, sing, and grieve. So intent upon our rights, our privileges, our cultures, our status in the world, that we forget to love each other and the rest of creation in which our lives are entwined and curled. So we need and request your blessing as we examine diverse presentations and review, knowing that your spirit can help us appreciate the indwelling of diversity that can help us see you and differentiate our troublesome diversities which need to be expropriated from the divine intent, the eternal world, the Zionic entelechy which you have created. We pray for unity in the name of the Prince of Peace. Amen. All right. Because Bruce was the first on the series and I haven't seen him, let me do a bit of reviewing there, because his presentation, well, his first presentation was on the W.W. Blair book, We'll Sing and We'll Shout. Marvelous biographical history of W.W. Blair. But this time he was presenting on George Reynolds, who was a secretary to the church leaders Brigham Young and his successors for up until about 1900. I think 5 or 6 different Mormon leaders that George Reynolds was the secretary for, and he was also the exemplary whose polygamy got challenged, so he ended up spending several years in prison. And while he was in prison, then he worked on putting together the commentary on the Book of Mormon, and his very detailed study of the Book of Mormon has sustained many people through the study of that book since. I find that particularly of interest because his contemporary was Henry Stebbins, who was the secretary to Joseph Smith III through the same time that George Reynolds was secretary to 6 of the LDS leaders. And Henry Stebbins, as the secretary to Joseph Smith III and secretary to the community, to the RLDS Church, wrote several books about the Book of Mormon, did a great deal of study and research. So here's 2 very interesting contemporaries. And one of the observations that Bruce and I came to at the end of his presentation was that we'd like to get those 2 gentlemen together because they clearly would have had a lot of area for discussion together. And so let me yield there, and let's invite Boyd Weeks to give us his review, and then I'll come back and we'll look at what Bill Morain had to offer. So Boyd, give us your 5-minute review, if you would, please.
Okay, we'll do that. See how this works. Y'all can see that?
Yes, your summary of items.
Yep, summary of items. And this is what I covered. As you might recall, mine was what the restoration missed in Lehi's dream, and I had a number of items that I felt that the restoration missed. So I'm just going to go through them quickly. First of all, there was no mention of anyone letting go of the iron rod. That's actually an assumption somehow that we're reading into it, but it's not written in there as such. Number two, there are two rivers and not just one. Three, the meaning of the river of filthy water is sorcery, witchcraft, and magic. Four, neither Lehi nor the restoration saw the filthiness of the water nor its meaning. Number five, the serpent cast water, meaning sorcery, witchcraft, and magic, out of his mouth against the woman, and the woman is the church of Christ. Number six, the large and spacious building, being the pride of the world, contain the house of Israel. They fight the 12 apostles, which is actually written in Lehi's dream. It's actually there. We overlook it. And they worship the workmanship of their own hands. Number seven, worshiping the workmanship of one's hands are associated with the worship of devils. Number eight, the merchants of the earth are specifically mentioned among the sorcerers. They use sorcery to deceive the nations. Number nine, the definition of the two churches are stated. First, the Church of the Lamb. These are those who love the Lord and repent.
Boyd, if number 9 is intended to be on the slide, we're still on number 8.
How is that possible? Okay, well, yes, number 9 is on here. Let me pull out of this thing and try it.
There you are.
Okay, right there.
Yes, now you have it. Yes.
Okay, well, I'll leave it in this format then and see if we can't do any better. All right, so the definition of the two churches. We have the Church of the Lamb and the Church of the Devil. The Church of the Lamb is defined as those who love the Lord and repent. And the Church of the Devil are those who engage in the occult in any of its many forms, as well as those who are under their dominion. We might take a side note here and notice that the word church is always in lowercase letters in the Book of Mormon. Number 10, we have the definition of two other important terms in the Book of Mormon that we defined. The great and abominable church is the satanic religion. That is the very heart of the secret combination that created and maintains Babylon. It is its adherents practice sorcery, witchcraft, and magic. And then Babylon. Babylon is the entire global social, governmental, and economic system that the sorcerers created and used to enslave the rest of the population. And this was established in ancient Babylon. It's been the model or format for all the rest of the nations ever since. Okay, we're on number 11 now. You can see it on the screen properly?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Restorationists have largely failed to recognize the many strange roads in Lehi's dream that caused so many to lose their way and warned the people. Number 12. Lehi followed a man dressed in a white robe for many hours in darkness. The man never told Lehi to call upon the Lord. Does this man represent the leaders of the restoration who have failed to warn their followers of the occult as they and their people have groveled into darkness? 13. The occult is obsessed with death and other perversions. Human sacrifices are not just something that was done in the Book of Mormon times. They are abundantly performed in our day more than at any time in human history. Number 14, Israel is clearly defined as those who love the Lord and repent, regardless of what political nation or race or culture one happens to be in. And the last one, the fall of Babylon and the great and abominable church will be a great blessing to the righteous. I want to emphasize this scripture. This is found in 1 Nephi chapter 3, toward the end of the vision that Nephi, when he was watching this vision. And when the day cometh that the wrath of God is poured out upon the mother of harlots, which is the great and earth, whose foundation is the devil, then at that day the work of the Father shall commence in preparing the way for the fulfilling of his covenants, which he hath made to his people who are of the house of Israel. So this is critical in order for the Father to fulfill his covenants. Babylon and the great and abominable church has to be taken down. And that's my summary.
Let me go back to, I'm sorry, I forgot which number it was, but you indicated human sacrifices, number 13.
Number 13, yeah.
You're saying the occult human sacrifices are abundantly performed in our day more than any time in human history?
Yes.
How do you support that statement?
Numerous witnesses. When I was giving my presentation, I had a list of a few of them up on the screen. There's just lots of testimonies online that people have experienced it, they've seen it, they participate in it. There's people who was forced to do it, and abortions are also a part of the ceremonies in many situations. But yeah, there are many people that have testified of it. You won't see it it's not something that's normally taught in colleges. It's not something you'll see on the major media. They don't talk about it. But there are many witnesses, many.
I can understand that number if you're counting abortions with it, but I am hard pressed to justify abortions being the result of the occult.
Okay, well, I could pull up one of these witnesses. What you want me to do that?
Well, yes, but let's save that for the discussion later in the hour after we've had a chance to more completely review the people that have been here.
Okay,
so,
sure.
Thank you for a concise summary there, and I'm sure the other people will be wanting to raise more questions as well.
Okay, sure.
All right, let's go then to Bill Morain's Sword of Laban. Bill Morain is a plastic surgeon who gives us a vantage point that fundamentally says the Book of Mormon is largely fiction. But he bases that upon some rather fascinating research. For as a psychologist, he has studied what happens to children in trauma. And so he points out that Joseph Smith Jr., at 7 years old, experienced 4 peculiarly devastating, traumatic experiences. First, a period of typhoid came into the community, and young Joseph got a swelling in his armpit that had to be lanced, and they got a quart of fluid out of that swelling in his armpit. But then that infection moved to his leg, and he had 3 surgeries on the leg. The first was to split from the knee down to the ankle to allow the fluid out. And the second, to separate the muscle from the bone and again try to get the fluid out. And these were apparently done without any legitimate anesthetic. And third, they took a hammer and chisel to chop out the infected bone and remove the diseased fragments in hopes that he would be able to regain his ability to walk. And it took him 3 years on crutches to be able to do that. And in in that time, he suffered the additional trauma of being basically sent away from his mother and father and siblings to go live with Uncle Silas at New Salem. And while New Salem gave him some opportunities to get fresh air from the sea breeze and also a chance to read the books in Uncle Silas's library, those may very well have been significant, particularly because it appears he probably had access to Jonathan Edwards there. But it was particularly interesting to me in William Morain's presentation to see that the traumatic experiences that he has as a child then would appear to have influenced his writings in the Book of Mormon, so that the elder brother, his idealization of Alvin, his older brother who died after an accident on the barn, that psychologically, Mr. Morain or Dr. Morain indicates comes back in the Book of Mormon as we look at the brother of Jared, who's the elder brother who has the close walk and talk with God and is able to see the Lord's finger. And then it also shows up as he's struggling, as Nephi is struggling with his older brothers, because here's these tense family relationships that are reminiscents of the tense family relationships that young Joseph had experienced. And then his father figure, the fact that his father had participated in holding him down while the doctors were hammering and chiseling on his leg. There's some serious tensions there, and so we begin to see that in the vision of Lehi, and the tensions that we have through the Book of Mormon accounts of the father figure throughout. And so Bill Morain's presentation raises some very interesting questions, and in particular, the highlighting of the trauma that young Joseph went through. The question of to what extent was that trauma influential in his later writings and his later decisions in prophecy and church and so forth. And Morain indicates that he thinks that the childhood trauma was a pivotal factor in Joseph Smith's adulthood as well. And I see a David Kaysen hand, and so I want to yield to that. Yes, David?
I just wanted to ask if you would repeat the second item that you mentioned after the typhoid. What was the second one? Could you repeat that?
The typhoid fever came into the New York community, and it resulted in Joseph getting a pustule on his armpit that ended up producing a quart of fluid, and then that infection then moved to his leg, and his left leg then ended up with 3 surgeries on it, none of which apparently had adequate anesthetic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Let me go on then with a quick review on Eric Scott. His father, Glen, wrote the book that Eric was reporting on. That is a rather remarkable work, because Glen Scott went to KU after he retired in order to work on a PhD, which he acquired, and then he wrote his book on the migration of the Book of Mormon peoples. And his perception is that the people of Jared actually transacted the full, well, basically it'd be most of Europe, some of Europe and all of Asia, to get to the Yellow River Valley, where he thinks that some of them departed for the Americas. But his implication confirms what Blair Bryant had earlier told us, that there are several towns in China that have the name Xi'an, which carries the implication of Zion, which then suggests that people were dropping out of the migration from the Jaredites and settling there to form communities of peace and places where they could hold their language together. although clearly languages continued to diversify over the years that followed. Glen Scott's book is, I think, still available. And one of the things that I found particularly interesting in it, he supposes that the beginning of the Olmec Jaredite calendar at August 13 of 3113 BC, that very explicit primary date may well have been the date of landing by the Jaredites in the Americas. And that would be a significant kind of event that might well account for the beginning of a calendar. But it's very interesting that we have difficulty with any calendar to try to figure out just when it gets started, why it gets started when it does. And the fact that we have such a confused, messed up calendar ourselves comes to my attention and focus, because I'm exasperated that here we are in celebrating Augustus Caesar after spending a month celebrating a Julius Caesar, and then we get into the last part of the year with all the months 2 months out of sequence. And that's to be using a calendar that's less accurate than the Maya calendar was 2,000 years ago. And so the irony there of our calendrics is something that Glen Scott raised, and I appreciate. And then we had Ralph Williston, and he will be back in another couple of weeks. But Ralph gave us the beginning of his treatment of First Nations traditions that are in the scriptures. And he began that sequence, but we didn't get to go but about halfway. And let me check my notes there, because he referred to 10 seeds and emphasized the rituals of using the eagle, and then he showed the scriptures of the eagle as well. And the idea that the earth would teach us is one of the concepts that is scriptural and very much part of the First Nations perception. The idea that the Creator is in and through all things, and that all things have spirit. These are the kinds of things that little eagle was highlighting as evidences of continuity between First Nations belief systems and the scriptures. And so we'll get to hear a lot more about that, because he'll be coming back. All right, I think I've gotten to Brent. So Brent, if you give us your 5-minute summation, please.
Yeah. So I presented on the idea that there's actually a lot of them, but I presented on 10 different seers who have brought forth records in our time, starting with Joseph and James Strang, and then some of the more recent ones. And I presented the idea that there's this question of, do they agree with each other? Do they agree with the scriptures in general? Are they harmonious? And I argued that if you want them to be, they are, and if you want them to not be, it's very easy to show that they aren't. And that seems to be what happens if you take any set of scriptures and ask, do these agree? Like if you asked a Jewish rabbi and a Catholic priest and a Mormon bishop, and you said, do the New and Old Testament agree with each other? Do the Book of Mormon agree with that? Like, they would all disagree about how much agreement there was. And I believe that, or I presented the idea that while you don't necessarily have to go read all of them, you shouldn't dismiss them simply because they're odd and new and different, or because they came forth in some way that's not what you're accustomed to, because the Lord told us how we can recognize truth, and that is to evaluate it and ponder on it and read and pray. And it kind of reminds me of in the Doctrine and Covenants, when Joseph Smith was retranslating the Bible into the inspired version, he had the question about the Apocrypha, and the answer that he got was that it was not the same as other scripture, but that it was also useful, and that if people read it and pray about it, they can pick out the gems. They can gather truth out of it. And I think that that's the right attitude to approach all of these with, is you have to have some willingness to stop and say, do I believe this? And at the same time, you don't have to just take it for what it is and assume that it has to be right, but you have to judge. And I think that that's maybe a requirement as we become more and more mature spiritually, that we need to learn to discern, and that we need to learn to expand and read more. And so that's what I presented on, and I'd be happy to entertain whatever sorts of questions you have about any of those records or the idea in general.
Well, we have one more person to review, and that's Frank Stribling. So any of you that have questions for Brent at this stage, you're certainly welcome to jump in with them. I like your statement, Brent, about the Apocrypha. I find, as I read, and I have read somewhat widely, that there is benefit from all kinds of scripture. The Tao Te Ching, and it is one that I have found has significant value. The Quran clearly, I think, has significant value. The writings of the Baha'u'llah, and so the more I explore the world religions, the more I find that I think there is value in them, and for us to learn to appreciate that rather than trying to discount, I think, is beneficial. All right, then Frank Stribling was the last presenter last week, and he presented on the Book of Mormon gems, and I have his book right here. And last week you had a chance to comment about and identify a bunch of those yourselves. He only listed 10 or so, but he has actually reduced the Book of Mormon down to about, I think he said 18%, a little over 15%, to get rid of the wars and the extraneous material, so that people could really focus upon the real gems that are there. And just as a couple of samples, I was interested that he did not include one of my favorites, which was from Helaman, chapter 5, verse 71, where the resurrection redeems all of mankind. But he did include that okay, I got a wrong page here. Now, may God grant in his great fullness that men might be brought into repentance and good works. They might be restored into grace, for grace according to their works. And that's also from that chapter of Helaman. And the fact is, he emphasizes that theme pretty thoroughly. So just because one of the gems that I would have put there didn't get in is not a particularly big deal. But the idea that we have in our scriptures a wealth of material that is worth sharing with other people, Frank was trying to simplify and help to make it so that there would be a grade school text about the Book of Mormon that would help people appreciate and understand it. All right, that's our quick review and summation. Plenty of time left, and so chance for you to go back to questions and comments. Oh, and I do want to get another comment in. For those of you that haven't participated in Blair Bryant's treatment on the characters document, we were on the 7th lesson tonight, and next week will be a review of the first lesson. And so if you would like to jump in at this stage, you can. But the exercise of studying, as he has, the Egyptian roots and means of trying to express in a written form, not words like what we use today, but in symbols, to give expression that could therefore be translated and communicated across culture, is a fascinating thing. And he has spent 30 years in his study on that small document. And tonight, as we begin putting the pieces back together to be able to see a full statement, a full legible sentence, and then recognize that full legible sentence is actually in the Book of Mormon in the introduction. It is a powerful testament to the remarkable research that's going on, and it's available for your perusal, for your education. And I'm proud to be hosting Blair Bryant and his efforts to teach people how to read those character documents. Oh, and I also want to highlight that Scott Forsyth is with us this evening, and he'll be presenting next week. And so, Scott, if you'd like to make a comment about next week's presentation. Not that we put you on the spot or anything, just that.
No problem. Thank you, Paul. Just thrilled to be with you this evening and be invited to do that. As a background, I don't know if Paul mentioned, on Father's Day in June, I was asked to present in the Book of Mormon study group, and Paul was there and just asked me to share some of those ideas on the Book of Mormon being a handbook of happiness and what it teaches about finding happiness in our lives. So look forward to that next week.
All right, good. Now, notice that here Boyd was sharing with us this evening that there's some serious warnings there about the occult and Satanism. And here we have Scott coming next week to say it's teaching us about happiness. And so, Boyd, you want to go back and suggest both of them are there?
Well, we'll suggest that next week too, that with every chapter on happiness, the next chapter is on misery of those who don't follow that plan. So I believe both sides are in the Book of Mormon side by side as they are in the
Okay.
Bible. I mean, we always talk about Joseph of Egypt, but the chapter before his great story is, or between chapter 38, is Judah and his escapades that aren't exemplary. So we hold up the law of chastity for Joseph, but right beside it, Moses chooses to put his brother who breaks the law of chastity.
Yeah, I completely agree with Scott. The Book of Mormon points us to know Christ and of his loving kindness for us and how to live more exemplary lives. And anyway, unfortunately, the subject matter I'm covering was heavy on the dark side, but just like Scott said, there's the most valuable part of it is how it leads us to know the Savior. Okay, so you ask a question about witnesses. I'm going to bring up the slide again that I showed before and to remind you that, okay, you remember we had this slide in my presentation of some of the witnesses, and this is just a few. But, so as you browse through that, remember, I'd like to, if you want to start viewing some of this stuff, look for the Hampstead Children Online. That's a good one because these are children talking about their experiences. Christy Allen, great one to follow. Christy O'Brien, Bryce Taylor, Fritz Sprigmeyer. You find her, this name's named Rachel online. She was on Oprah Winfrey show one time talking about the satanic abuse in her family. It was generational. But let me bring up a 6-minute. Can y'all see this one on my screen? There's
multitudes of witnesses from all over the world have testified.
Okay, can you let me?
You had a brief video, I think, that flashed on and then off.
Okay, let me I'm gonna make sure I get this thing shared. I'm seeing how to do this. New share. All right. I think this is it. Okay, can you see this lady on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to play. This is about 6 minutes long, and this is yet another witness that you can hear from his own words on, from his own mouth on this one. This was about as a lot of them are really gory. I mean, they'll make you sick to the stomach really listening to him. This guy's probably explained it to it in about as PG rated as we can get.
We don't have sound, Boyd.
All right. Now, what do we do about that?
You need to share sound.
Share sound. Where do we find that? Okay, all right, I see it now. All right, I'm going to try it again. Tell me if you can hear it.
Hobbes was initiated into a
Yes, we
satanic coven
can.
as a child by his grandfather and continued participating for many years. I recently asked Glen about his involvement and the importance of Halloween to the occultist.
Well, my involvement in satanic worship was, I was involved in it as a child. Of course, I was a generational Satanist, what they call a generational Satanist, and what that means is that my family was involved in it and their family before them. Now, my earliest rememberings of Halloween and some of the things that were involved was, it was a very dark time for me as a child. It was something that I didn't enjoy.
Glen, could you tell us about your involvement in any rituals at Halloween as a child?
There was another little girl that was involved in the occult with me, and her name was Becky. Now, Becky was a different type of child. She was blessed to be a sacrifice. I was being blessed to be a high priest, where she was being blessed and born into the coven there to be a sacrifice. Now, we were in a ritual where we were married together. It was a marriage to the beast, and me and the little girl were married together, and there was a lot of sexual abuse that took place, and a lot of over us, joining us together.
When do Halloween rituals actually begin, and what is the ultimate purpose of Halloween?
Well, the ritual that I remember the most clearly began about the end of September. Me and the little girl, the one I mentioned named Becky, the abuse was very concentrated at that time. We were taken into several rooms where our clothing was removed. We spent the next couple of weeks in a kind of a shack where a lot of rituals went on, where a lot of animals were killed. They summoned Lucifer and his spirit to come and possess me, and so that I would be blessed to take over the position of the high priest at a certain point in time. Now, Halloween night, they had again put me and the little girl in the back of this van, and we again drove off, which seemed like for a long time. We were drugged once again, and we finally came to this stop. They took the little girl out and they left me in the van. I could hear a lot of commotion that was going on outside. People that were screaming and yelling, and this low murmuring and moaning noise that was going on, like some kind of a low chanting noise that was going on. So I knew in my mind there was some type of a ritual going on, because I'd heard that many times before. You know, it was real common to see people fall on the ground and convulse and go into convulsions during rituals and stuff with the demonic presence that were around. And finally, a woman came to the back of the van and she said, "It's time to go." And she brought me out of the van, and I could see that there was just a lot of people. Some were dressed in dark brownish kind of robes with hoods over them. They took me up and they led me up to this stone altar. And I remember I saw the little girl, and she was on the altar. Now, at first, you know, I just wondered what was going on, because you never knew. I mean, they used the altar for a lot of different things. They could have just been sacrificing an animal over, could have been a sexual abuse from the high priest on to her. You know, it was a hard thing to know for sure. Well, they ushered me up to the altar, and I could see that they had bound her feet. They had her feet spread apart, her legs, and they had bound them to the ends of the altar, and they had taken her arms, which were laying out this way, and roped them to the altar, which had little kind of like hooks, which they could bind the ropes around. And she was really white. I remember seeing her, and she was just real pale and real white. And I noticed that they had slit the bottoms of her feet and her wrists, and they were taking the blood that was running out of those areas and putting them into chalices and passing those cups around to different people who were partaking of her blood. Then the high priest, he took the athami, or the ritual knife, and he picked it up and he put my hand on it, and then he forced it into her chest. So when I think back on Halloween, you know, over that period of time that happened, you know, that was the climax event, Halloween night, where they killed that innocent little girl. And this is something that's happening that's not just an isolated event. I mean, there are children all over the world who are losing their lives during Halloween night, and yet we, as a society, we go out and celebrate it, and we go door to door and we ask for candy, and it's a big celebration to us. And I think it's quite ironic how one group of people are thinking it's fun, and another group of people are taking human life, and yet they don't, you know, there seems to be this wall, and nobody wants to face the facts of what's really going on.
Okay. Let me find the Zoom again here. Am I still on Zoom?
You're still speaking to us, yes.
Okay. I'm trying to see what I'm doing here on my screen. That is one testimony. I mean, I got more we could pull up. I mean, I could pull up this Rachel. There's another 4 minutes where she's giving her interview and she's saying much the same thing. But you know, you can go and dig into this stuff. Well, it's widely available. There's lots of videos on YouTube. You can, you know, all over the internet, and hear hours and hours and hours of interviews, and they're similar. And you don't hear it on the national news or too much, or, you know, like I say, I've never heard it when I was in college, but you know, it's just too many witnesses in order to just shoot it off and say, well, it's just a figment of somebody's imagination. It's just hundreds, maybe thousands of these witnesses.
Certainly that was graphic testimony, and painful to watch and hear.
It reminds you of how the Book of Mormon ends, with the Nephites doing those kinds of things and drinking the blood, and Moroni and Mormon just, you know, talk about the corruption that the society descended to and had to be destroyed and eliminated. And I think the hardest thing for Nephi to see, as he fought with his own brothers, Laman and Lemuel, was a vision of 1,000 years future where his people would become like that and be overcome, and Laman and Lemuel's descendants are the ones that survive and move on. And
Yeah,
must have been a tough thing for Nephi to see all those years in advance.
exactly. Yeah,
Hi, Val. Did you have a question, Val, or a comment?
Yeah, this is Boyd, can you pull up bullet point, or your observation number 12?
okay. I am still trying to negotiate this thing here. Number 12. Oh, yeah, let me try this. I'm trying to get rid of this window now.
We're
There's a
seeing,
way to do it.
we're seeing number 15, the fall of Babylon.
Yeah, I got this. All right. Well, no, let me get, it keeps popping back up here. How to get rid of this window? I'm going to shut this part down, see if as long as I stay up online, and see if I can't get the screen out of here. You see what I got this window that popped up here in front of this thing, and I can't seem to get rid of it. And I don't know how to get rid of it.
Stop.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Stop sharing, then come back to it and try again.
All right. Now we hit share screen again. Oh, brother.
That's where you were.
I can tell you kind of what you said in 12.
Okay,
There
which
you go.
number now?
There you go.
Here we go.
All right, so you're saying that well, the person that Lehi follows comes to him in a white robe,
Uh-huh.
which I think personally is a continuation of Lehi's first vision, because Jehovah descends to Christ descends to Lehi dressed in white in the first vision, and then at the beginning of Lehi's, or of Lehi's first vision, and then at the beginning of Lehi's dream, this being comes dressed in white. What he tells Lehi is, "Follow me." Now we know there's a person who says, "Come follow me," distinctively, and Lehi follows him for a time. And then it says he prayed unto the Lord. Now the word Lord in Hebrew, this would be a translation of the word Yahweh. So he prays unto Yahweh, and as soon as he prays unto Yahweh, he immediately sees the tree, and the tree is bearing white fruit. There's only two white things in that dream. It's the white robe that the guide is wearing, and the white fruit that is hanging on the tree. The white fruit is like a sacramental fruit. And so I think personally, and I think this is confirmed in Lehi's or Nephi's experience of the dream, that the guide that he has is Christ. Christ is leading him, dressed in white, and then Christ is the fruit of the tree when he sees it. So that'd be my comment on point 12.
Okay. Yeah, I posed the question, I noted that this man dressed in white never told Lehi to call on the Lord. He just said, follow him, and they went on in darkness for many hours. And it was only until once Nephi called upon the Lord at that moment, all of a sudden now he saw the tree of life. But, the man never told him anything about the tree of life, never gave him any counsel in that way. And so they just remained in darkness until that point. That's where I come from.
I think that it was the Lord that he was following, and then he called upon the Lord, and when he prayed to the Lord, the person he's following, the Lord instantly revealed to him the tree of life, which had white fruit on it. But anyway, these things are subject to more than one reading for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Rick, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Boyd.
Hi.
See if I can find you on the screen. Okay. You've got a head like mine.
Yeah, it's pretty shiny.
Okay, and on the Zoom screen, you're right below me. I have a question about this. No one is recorded as letting go of the rod.
Yeah.
I've been looking over that, and I mean that critical reading of it seems to be correct. And I'm in I don't know what version you have chapter and verse.
I use several of them, so I got
Okay. So I'm in First Nephi 2:62. And I beheld a rod of iron, it extended along the bank of the river. It led to the tree by which I stood, and also held a straight and narrow path. And 60, I beheld a rod of iron, and it extended along the bank of a river, and led to the tree by which I stood. And I also beheld a straight and narrow path. Okay, I read that, which came along by the rod of iron. Okay, so the straight and narrow path is parallel to the rod of iron in my imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Even to the tree by which I stood. It also led by a head of a fountain to a large and spacious field that had been a world. And I saw numberless concourses of people, many of whom were pressing forward that they might obtain the path which led to the tree by which I stood. Okay, so I guess it's always been my assumption that when they pressed forward that they might obtain the path which led to the tree by which I stood, that they were holding on to that rod of iron. And that, like I said, was an assumption. But then it seems like who the only people are that actually is written that took hold of the rod was Nephi and the people that fell away that were ashamed. They ended up making it to the tree, and then they got scoffed at, and then they fell away into forbidden paths and were lost.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I don't know if it says the rod of iron is the word of God.
Mm-hmm.
So in his vision, did anybody else make it to the tree? Well, yeah, the following people made it to the tree and they bowed down and they ate the fruit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So your point is that once they grabbed onto the rod of iron, they never let go until they reached the tree.
Right. That's what the record says. There's
Right.
no mention of anybody letting go of the rod.
Right.
Yeah.
But one group followed the rod, got to the tree, ate of the fruit, and fell away.
That's right. Uh-huh.
So what do you equate them holding on to the rod and making it to the tree as being before they fell away? I mean, the rod of iron is, of course, the word of God, and the
Mhm.
fruit is the love of God. So they gave that all up because they were ashamed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, only thing I could do is speculate like anybody else is the meaning of that. But what I was pointing out is that everywhere, as long as I've been involved with there's always talk about letting go of the iron rod, but that's not what it says. And so I was just pointing out that we're making assumptions that's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, some of my assumptions are good and some are not so.
Yeah.
So
Happened to all of us.
the man that speaks to Nephi in his dream, in First Nephi 3:50, it says, I spake unto him as a man speaketh, for I beheld he was in the form of a man, yet nevertheless I knew that it was the Spirit of the Lord, and he spake unto me as a man speaketh with another. Would that make him more than a mere man?
Well, I think it said it was an angel, wasn't it?
Nope.
How's it say?
Well, here's what when you get it's a form of a man, and he knew it was the Spirit of the Lord. But 3 verses later, when he sees the virgin in the city of Nazareth, then it says, came to pass that I saw the heavens open, and an angel came down and stood before me. So there was a switcheroo on his guide at that point, and it is an angel in Nephi's vision. So first a man, which he knew it was a spirit, and then at the vision of the birth of Jesus, it becomes an angel.
The spirit. The other thing about it is that the Spirit of the Lord tells him as he's well. First, I should say, Rick, the stuff you read is an echo of Moses speaking face to face with Yahweh. the language there is the same. Spoke unto him face to face as a man speaketh with another is a quote of Moses speaking with Yahweh. And then the Spirit of the Lord tells Nephi that to look. And when Nephi goes to look at him, he disappears. And then the angel comes. And then when the angel repeats the word look, Nephi looks and he sees Mary holding the baby Jesus. So I think there's very strong reason, if you're reading that closely, to the Spirit. Also, the phrase "the Spirit of the Lord" is used when brother of Jared has his encounter with the Spirit of the Lord. That's clearly Jesus. He sees his hands, and so I think we have very good reason to think that the Spirit of the Lord in Nephi's vision is the premortal Christ or Christ, and the reason why the angel has to come is because the Christ is now descended to earth and is showing up as the baby Jesus. So he had been the guide, but he can't be the guide anymore because he's in the drama as the baby Jesus. That's why the angel comes.
Yeah, you're thinking he can't be in two places at once.
Well, he could be, but when you're telling a story, it would at least be confusing to have him both be the person that's the baby Jesus and the person that's talking about the baby Jesus.
Yeah.
The
Hey,
fact that he disappears
Yeah.
right at that moment.
there I
That
am.
sounds,
There I am. Aren't I cute?
The
yeah,
fact
that sounds plausible.
the fact that he disappears at that very moment, and then the next time the word look is repeated, you see the baby Jesus, suggests that he had descended and had become the baby Jesus.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I kind of made my own conclusion or hypothesis about why the man as a spirit couldn't stay during the vision. Okay, so Boyd, also if I remember correctly, yeah, I only got part of your screen, but one of your numbers said that the myths of darkness were sorceries and oh, here it is. I think sorcery, witchcraft, magic, or
No, it's the river of filthy water is sorcery, witchcraft, and magic because of the mist of Satan. But
okay.
the river of filthy water is something entirely different.
Okay, so when I go to 1 Nephi 3:124, it says, The angel spake unto me, saying, Behold, the fountain of filthy water which I saw, even the river which he spake, and the depths thereof are the depths of hell. Okay, so you've kind of quantified it into specific things that we experience today that are evil.
Yeah.
And some of that is coming out in what is it? 3rd Nephi chapter 14, very short chapter, but there's a list of terrible things that the Gentiles are guilty of. And the midst of darkness, one more verse, 125, the midst of darkness are the temptations of the devil, which blindeth the eyes, harden the hearts, and children of men. Okay, so I don't think I'm involved in sorcery, witchcraft, and magic, but I do believe I have temptations of the devil. So could there be other temptations besides this sorcery, witchcraft, and magic?
I identified 5 different ways in Lehi's dream to which the people lose their way. One of them is they partake of the tree of life. I think somebody mentioned that earlier. And they take of the fruit. They're ashamed because of the people in the.
Yeah.
Okay. We saw those in the great and spacious, or the large and spacious building, being the pride of the world. So that's 2. You got the temptations of the devil being the mist, and you got those that are drowned, literally drowned in the river of filthy water, which we identify as sorcery, witchcraft, and magic, which is a whole new level of wickedness we don't talk about.
Well, wait a minute. You identified that as sorcery, witchcraft, and magic. The Book of Mormon doesn't identify that with sorcery, witchcraft, and magic, does it?
I believe it does.
Do you have a passage that says the midst of darkness is sorcery, witchcraft, and magic?
Well, were you there for my presentation when I talked about that?
No, I missed it.
Okay. Just a brief view on it. We're seeing here where it talks about the river of filthy water. And remember the part, let me try to find it again.
So it's not a clear scripture. It's something that you deduced.
Oh, you can, yeah. And I believe there's plenty of evidence showing that it's exactly what it is.
Okay, well,
you remember,
I know that your PowerPoint's probably recorded and I can go back and watch it.
Yeah,
Instead of
yeah.
taking everybody's time.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I went through a series of scriptures on it to show you that to me, that's what it is. So
To you, that's what it is.
to me, that's what I deduced. Yes.
Okay, and you would like to prove to me that that's what it is.
Well, you know, I presented the scriptures and let you go
Yeah.
back and review and see what you think.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There was a fifth thing that we didn't mention. I told you there's 5 ways in which they lose the way. There's a fifth one. And that's where people wander in strange paths and are lost. And that's mentioned right after it talks about the river of filthy water.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So that's yet another one. And I brought that out of my presentation as well as to what I felt that meant.
Yeah.
Again, this is all coming from, and you have to believe it or anything. This is where I'm at. See.
So they're pressing towards the path, but then they wander off in strange paths.
Well, actually, no, it talks about that they went on other paths. That's another one. There's like 3 different ways in which people wander off. One of them is in strange paths. One of them is in, what was the other 2? The midst of darkness, they wandered off and were lost. That's what it says on that one.
Yeah.
And there's other ones where they go into forbidden paths and are lost. And then there's another one where they wander into strange paths and are lost. And I believe that they're not all quite the same.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
and I think that we can actually differentiate. There's, you know.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about the increase of Satanism and those what do you call it, events happening.
Uh-huh.
I worked with a woman who was a witch, and she said, yeah, Halloween's our highest day.
Mm-hmm.
And
Precisely.
so yeah, and if you read any of Rebecca Brown's books, she came out of Satanism too, and explains some horrific events that she witnessed and participated in before she was delivered.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I'll yield.
Okay, let me jump in. Boyd, I hear what you're saying, I think, as pretty closely tied to the Satanist cult. Yet, as I read the Book of Mormon, I read about the dangers of murmuring
Mm-hmm.
and the dangers of secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
And those, while they might be associated with satanic cult, those to me seem to be very human activities.
Exactly. Yeah, you got they're like you say, they're human activities, just the common temptations that people typically have. The occult takes them to a whole new level and does those type of things purposely.
Okay, well,
We ready for David DeBarth?
yes, yeah, let's get the other
Been
people.
very patient. Go ahead, please, David, and then David Ferryman.
Thank you. Hi, Boyd.
Hi, David.
I'm concerned about how you authenticate information found on the internet. For example, the Flat Earth Society has their pages out on the internet where they have their assumed proofs that the Earth is flat. And that is a question. I'd like to show you a web page, but I need to be able to share screen. So can you let me have share screen for a minute by closing yours?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, here's a web page. The Hampstead hoax. The Hampstead children is a hoax, according to this web page.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find what you want to find, I think, on the internet. And I think using the internet as a source of information is very risky.
Well, it's in any argument you make, if you use the internet, it could be risky. Yeah, you have to use discernment. And in this situation, there are hundreds and hundreds of testimonies. It's not coming from one person. It's not coming from any specific time period. They've been going back for many, many years. And there's books that are written by authors. I mean, I got some on my shelf up here that where people talk about this stuff. I mean, after a while, the testimonies collaborate. And so not all of this information is coming off the internet. I mean, like I say, there's actual hardbound books over here that talks about these things. And I've got books that I gave away years ago. I've seen this stuff for years. I'm not making it up, you know.
So you're authenticating by the volume, what you assume to be the volume of data that you found.
That's a large part of it. Yeah. Just after here, if I heard just one or two witnesses, I said, well, maybe they're making it up, but not this many. And there's one thing of reading the Hampstead children on Wikipedia, because I don't believe half the stuff on that one, because that one's internet. But if you actually listen to these children talk, there's like a 5-hour interview with these children. And
yeah, I didn't read this webpage. I just when I look up Hampstead children, this is the first webpage I happen to find. That's intriguing.
Yeah, but I mean, if you can actually look up these children and listen to their interview at length, and it is sickening. It'd make you sick to your stomach. I mean, it made me cry. And children just don't make that kind of wickedness up. I mean,
you don't believe that to be a hoax?
No, I don't. There's just too many witnesses. Yeah.
Okay.
And like I say, there's a lot of things on Wikipedia because anybody can go in there and say what they want. Wikipedia, I have done it myself. You can actually go on Wikipedia and rewrite things the way you think it is, and then someone else can come behind you and put something else totally out there. So if somebody's trying to hide something, they can just go on Wikipedia, write up something, say, oh, it's a hoax, and you know, what's the source? You know, it's just somebody's opinion. So the original sources that go to the children themselves and actually listening to their interviews.
Well, no, you can't go to the children themselves. You can go to pages that people say are from the children. So you're still stuck with that. How do you authenticate it?
Yeah.
And the way I'm simply saying the internet is not considered, at least academically, to be a valid source of information.
True. You're right on that. Now, I have personally known some people that have given me some similar testimonies that people I've known. And only thing I wasn't there when they experienced these things. I can just take their experiences and say, okay, does it feel right or it doesn't? You know, when I ask the Lord about it, you know, we pray about these things and ask the Lord, well, are they true? You know?
Yeah, that's a wonderful area of exploration, is how much of the experience with the Lord is yours and how much is hearsay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thrilled that the Lord has made himself available to all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. It took me a few years to decipher a lot of this. And there is actually some things that I've experienced myself. And I haven't experienced the human sacrifices and all, but I have experienced some satanic things firsthand. When I was 19 years old, I played with a Ouija board. I experienced that. I went to a New Age boot camp, spent 5 months through it, and they deprive us of sleep and all types of things. I've been into I met another fellow that I perceived to be a sorcerer, and he had some element there that was sorcery. I believe it was. But anyway, there's some things I've experienced and that correlate to some of the satanic things that I've seen. So there's a number of things that I've extracted this understanding from.
Too bad we can't find some artifacts, huh?
Well, if you look, you find them. They're out there.
Well, let me highlight for the rest of you that Boyd has been coming on Saturday mornings to dig with us at the Joseph Smith Historic Site, and I appreciate his volunteering to come actually look for the artifacts. Let me also highlight that we have on today the review of the previous 8, but next Monday we have Scott Forsyth. Following that is David Furman, then Ralph Williston, Rick Disick, who is that? Rick Bennett is coming from Gospel Tangents. Paul Lucero and Ron Smith will be coming back in the next sequence. And so the continuing interest of people to present unique perspectives on this forum is one of the reasons that we're still here. And thank you all for treating each other with respect and amicability. And back to Deb on the queue.
Okay, thanks, Paul. David Ferriman and then Val. Go ahead, David.
Thank you. I just wanted to really quickly kind of point out, I call myself a bit of a messianic Mormon. Other messianic Mormons, they kind of get upset about the idea of celebrating Christmas, celebrating Easter, when we really should be celebrating Passover and Sukkot and the holidays that are in the Bible. But the thing I generally say is, any opportunity that we have to celebrate Jesus, I'm going to do it. So I'm going to celebrate Christmas. I'm going to celebrate Easter. Halloween to me is a very, very Christian holiday. And I understand that it's like Nephi told his son Joseph in beginning of second Nephi, first chapter for RLDS, about the middle of it, second chapter for Salt Lake City Church. But there's going to be opposition in all things. But the idea of opening up our homes and sharing with one another and teaching our children that it's okay to love our neighbors and to trust our neighbors. I just think that is a very beautiful thing. And I don't want that to be overlooked because of what some people might be doing. There really isn't enough evidence, because if there were, then this would be something that's on the news. It would be something that people were trying to stop. But what we do see is people opening their homes and spending their own money to share with their community. And yeah, it's candy. I'm sure that makes dentists happy, with the cavities and more dental work to be done. But I just want to point out the good that's out there, and we can't just dwell on the negative. I just wanted to share that testimony really quick.
Can I add I think that kind of plays into what Brent kind of spoke about too, where there can be good and there can be bad, and there can be agreement and there can be disagreement in all things. It just depends on how you choose to align your perspective sometimes too.
That's Kristen speaking.
Yes, sorry, Dave's wife.
All right, I don't have you on the video, and so I just wanted to clarify. But thank you for stepping in, Kristen, and we'll look forward to having both of you in 2 weeks.
Val, go ahead, please, and then Monty.
So this is just a passing comment prompted by Paul's review of the surgeries that were done on Joseph Smith. It doesn't in any way contradict the theory that was put forward, but I did read an article years ago from a historian who looked at that surgery closely and looked at the medical procedure. And he said in this article that there were it wasn't more than 5 people in the world who knew how to do that surgery. It was a very small number, and one of them happened to be proximate to Joseph Smith. And I think it was providential that he was there and saved Joseph's life. Now, that doesn't mean Joseph didn't experience tremendous trauma. You can imagine how this would be something that would influence you or stick with you through your life. But I do think God's hand was in the performance of that surgery, and that doctor being available there to do it and then saving Joseph.
And Bill Morain does cites the doctor as being one of those specialists. And so, yes, Bill Morain supports what you're saying.
Okay. Monty, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Deb, I tuned in kind of late, and so I got into the the meeting where you were talking about the filthy river, and there's no mystery there. I mean, everybody knows you're talking. In Kansas, if you live in Kansas City, they are talking about the Missouri River. I mean, No, that's the truth. It was known as brown water, because it was so crummy. And who was it? I don't know if it was one of the Lewis or Clark or somebody said that it couldn't support human life, and so that was one of the things I was thinking on that. Another thing, when you're looking at the internet, you want to remember the old phrase, a man who keeps an open mind must remember, if your mind is open enough, a lot of garbage will fall in. And it's just, it sounds like a slight, but it's not really. I mean, we're listening to people expressing their raw, researched, unsubstantiated truth, what they consider to be the truth. And so, believing something just because someone else believes it can lead you to all kinds of problems. And I'm not saying that to be snide to the person doing the speaking here. I just, with the internet, it's believe nothing that you hear and only half of what you see. And so that's how I keep from getting upset about stuff, because I think I'm hearing people's impressions, not necessarily fact. And let's see, I'm just about through with my.
Well, Monty, let me interrupt, because there was a neat little addition in the chat room indicating Monty is a gem.
Oh, Monty should go to the gym, but I mean.
All right. Well, thank you for adding your quips of humor to it. That yeah, we need to laugh. That's one of those spiritual gifts that I think all of us need to share.
Well, hopefully I haven't offended anybody. I just trying to say I didn't name those comments at anyone in particular. I just was giving my 2 cents, which you easily can disbelieve if you want to.
Monty, when I was growing up, I was told the Missouri River was too thick to drink and too thin to plow.
Thank you, Monty. Rick, go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks. Paul, I had to step out for the time when you were summarizing a psychiatrist's presentation, or was a psychiatrist really on the forum tonight?
I was summarizing for Bill Morain, whose book is The Sword of Laban, and so recommend the book to you. And he's actually a plastic surgeon, but he's studied the psychology of child trauma and extensively.
Okay.
He's now retired and lives on the 2 houses east of me.
Carol's holding up a picture that she did.
Oh, I thought that was Carol's new image.
Yeah. That was the presenter.
Nice, Carol. Oh, you're back. That's good. But what I did hear was that he said the Book of Mormon was fiction, or?
Yes, fundamentally, Bill Morain holds the Book of Mormon to be fiction, perhaps good fiction, and just like the Old Testament, like the Bible, it has fiction that's worthy of being scripture, perhaps. But he does not. He does not believe in the historicity of the Book of Mormon, and so in this forum on perspectives, where we've only had a couple of people who've taken that vantage point to indicate that the land of Nephi comes out of Joseph Smith's head rather than in Mesoamerica or the Heartland or Peru or Guatemala or Peninsula and so forth. We have all of these interesting disputes, and Bill Morain happens to be one who says the Book of Mormon fundamentally comes out of Joseph Smith's head and background experience.
Yeah, and so I was hoping he was here. He would be here to answer my question, and that would be, what did the golden plates come out of Joseph Smith's head too? And did the 11 witnesses come out of Joseph Smith's head too?
He would, I think, assert that yes, probably that there's a lot more of the social psychology involved than there is actual physical evidence.
Okay, man, I run into people that are anti-Book of Mormon and they call it fiction. And now I've sort of met somebody that believes the Book of Mormon and calls it fiction. I don't know what's left.
I would submit to you that's a pretty good sized gathering. There are quite a lot of people, I think, that hold the Book of Mormon to be fiction, and yet that means it still has um, fiction. Often is able to help highlight truth for people they don't see otherwise.
So when the Doctrine and Covenants 42 says the Bible and the Book of Mormon contain the fullness of the gospel, was that the words of God, or the words of Joseph Smith, or the words of people he had brainwashed? I don't know. I guess I'm asking the wrong person.
Well, Rick,
I guess I'm asking the wrong person. But
you're raising that question in a forum where we
Yeah.
can leave it open for people to respond to you. So
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
he might, if he was here, he might say something like this. This isn't a position I hold, but lots of scholars think the Book of Job is a story, not something that happened historically. If it is a story, and also the story of Jonah and the whale, they could be folk stories, but that doesn't mean they don't have profound wisdom in them and truth. And literature can communicate truth. Aristotle actually said literature was truer than history because literature was about what would happen or is normal and real, and history has all kinds of contingencies in it. So it wouldn't automatically follow that if I think a lot of folks take the view that it's inspired storytelling, and a lot of people think that about the parts of the Bible, or in some cases most of the Bible. It does make a difference, because for sure, if Christ didn't rise from the dead, we're all we're all lost. But not every story that's in the Bible is equally important. And I think that's the kind of view that people would take. Again, it's not necessarily my view, but I know I've heard that articulated multiple times.
Okay, thanks. I see Frank is on.
Yeah, I wanted to make Paul aware of that. Frank Stribling came on, Paul. I don't know if you saw that.
I did. Great.
So gentlemen, Boyd and Brent, will hold off for Paul to talk to Frank.
Yeah, Frank, we've had the review, and I just gave a brief review of your gems, but typically we invite the presenter to give that 5-minute review and share with us the high points of it. So if you'd like to make comment, that would be very, very welcome.
It was a good review, Paul.
Well, thank you.
Frank, we're not hearing you or seeing you. Oh, Carol's showing him.
That's Frank. Frank, Carol, have you
She does that for almost everybody.
Carol, have you got image sketches of all of us?
Not everybody, but quite a few, most of them. Like tonight, I didn't catch you, but I only got a few minutes to do each one, and you're only about 3 inches wide on here, but it's very good practice. So
He's giving
I'm catching your image.
This is Frank. Can you hear me at all?
Now we can, Frank. Yeah.
Oh, well, good. I can't see you, but a week ago I had more help than I'm by myself now.
Well, congratulations on getting your audio on. What would you offer us in summation?
Well, in summation, I can just say, how can anyone deny the wonderful gems that I've noted out of the 150? You have to be a Christian, and of course, a Jewish background would help. So what can I say? The Book of Mormon pretty well says it all. It's a fact. It's not fiction. I've been with the Hill Cumorah expedition team. I've seen the stela that on one side of it says 1,005 gave their lives. Another side of it says 2,351 were saved. When I present the Book of Mormon to anyone talking in general conversation, I say that all I'm doing is just adding to your beliefs. I'm not subtracting anything. I'm just like putting frosting on the cake. And how can you deny scriptures that speak of Christ as little, even, I haven't really checked this out personally, but even comparing it to the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, which Eric pointed out about a month ago, there are so many questions that are answered by the Book of Mormon that are not necessarily answered by the Bible. That doesn't mean I don't believe in the Bible. I'm currently going through the Old Testament right now. But my question is, what can I say? I can't make anybody believe anything. Look at our political situation in this country. It's a mess. That's all that I have to say.
All right, thank you. Thank you for making the effort to come on and give us your summary. All right, back to Deb with the queue.
Okay, Boyd and then Brent. Go ahead, Boyd.
When you mentioned earlier about the Book of Mormon, to some folks being fiction, there is a question I would have asked Bill if he was here. How do you explain the fact that in experiences like my own, I guess if I'm looking around here, I suppose most of you were born and raised in a restoration. I wasn't. I grew up a Baptist, and then I was a Methodist, and then I went on this real diligent path. I prayed like everything depended on God, and I worked like everything depended on me. I searched, and I was looking for the truth. I went from one church after another hunting, and when I was 20 years old, I came across a member of the LDS church. Oh, and he was less active. He presented me a Book of Mormon. He wasn't even active enough to even tell me what they really believed. But he loaned me his Book of Mormon. I took it and I prayed about it. I read, like the first 16 chapters of the book in one night, from the first night. And I was overcome with the Spirit just so strong. I cried for hours, thanking the Lord for that book. I felt his Spirit so strong. How can you possibly, after experiencing that, I could never deny the Book of Mormon. And even I didn't understand what else is in that book. I can't deny the Lord's Spirit that strong. And that wasn't a figment of my imagination. I mean, that was something I literally experienced. And I'm sure many of you might have experienced similar things, but mine was sudden and it was powerful and it was overwhelming. And I determined from that point on, I was going to give everything I had to the Lord from that point on. How can you just explain away somebody's experience like that?
I don't think Bill would try to explain away your experience, but he would point out that that we are emotionally tied to the experiences of our past and our present, and those can be stimulated by fiction as well as they can by history, and the story of the book, he would agree, I think, has sufficient merit and sufficient spirit behind it that it very well could testify. By the same token, Jonathan Livingston's Seagull is the story of a seagull that was able to fly almost the speed of sound. And while that seagull story is clearly fictional, I remember it as being profoundly moving for me, and I recognize that there are numerous fictional pieces that I have encountered, read, participate in that I would rank very close to value of Scripture. In other words, I think Bill would agree that you're entitled to your experience, and he would not dispute your experience. But he's saying that that doesn't your experience does not make the Book of Mormon historically accurate.
Yeah, that's something though he and I would be completely on opposite sides of the ocean on that one.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, thanks, Boyd. Brent, and then Monty. Go ahead, please, Brent.
So I also wanted to comment on the historicity question. So I've wandered over the course of my life through several different perspectives on this, and I wouldn't personally consider anybody's perspective on it unreasonable. Like, there was a time where when I was stopping and asking, is this book true, where I really, the conclusion I came to wasn't that it was historically accurate or not or anything else. The conclusion I came to was that it was true, and it's true because it's full of truth. And that doesn't necessarily mean that every part of it was accurate. It doesn't mean it wasn't. It means that if you live it, it brings you in alignment with God, and that's what makes it truth, regardless of its accuracy. And so I'm now to the point where I think it did historically happen, but I'm less worried about that. Like, to me, it makes no difference if it was historically accurate, because its value comes from what I choose to do because I read it. And regardless of its accuracy, it's true. And so, and if the prophets who are writing it were trying to build a parable out of it, and they had to modify details in order for the parable to have the biggest meaningful impact for us, I would rather that they give us the story in the way that brings us to Christ and allow the details to become fuzzy if they have to. I'm not saying that happened, but if somebody wanted to have the opinion that it did, I wouldn't look at him and say, you're crazy, that just can't be right, because since it's from the Lord, it must be word for word accurate and historical. It just doesn't bother me anymore.
Okay, thanks, Brent. Frank, it's good to see everybody. Give Frank a round of applause. He found the video as well. That's very good. Good job, Frank. Monty, go ahead, please.
Let's see. Am I muted?
Nope, not anymore.
Okay. Sometimes my wife wishes I was. The
oh, kitty.
Yeah, she decided to come up here and get some loving instead of letting me talk. But it's oh shoot. I had a similar experience to what Lloyd was talking about when I read the Book of Mormon. I wasn't really searching for the Book of Mormon at the time. I mean, I knew that one of these days I was going to read it as one of the texts that I was planning to look at. I was planning to read the Quran and the books of Baha'u'llah and just a number of different groups. I was invited to a Methodist sunrise service, and one of the people in the sunrise service was a girl that I really wanted to date. And so I asked her, about the service and how it was going. And she said, well, actually, I'm not Methodist. I just came here as a guest myself. And she said, the church I follow, believes in the Bible, the Book of Mormon, and the Doctrine and Covenants. And so we got to talking about it, and I said, well, I'm planning to read the Book of Mormon one of these days. And she said, well, I've got one I'll give you. And you can, you get an opportunity to read it now. Well, I read the Book of Mormon and it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was more a confirmation that this was every bit as much a divinely inspired document as the Bible. Now, may have wondered about how all of this windup gets to the point. I believe that we are not a church of deciding we've got the fullness of the gospel. We're a church that keeps our ears open to hear what God has us to do on a daily basis. And that's how I deal with God. I'm carrying on many times, like one-way conversations, it seems like. But when he does answer me, sometimes it really, really warms my heart. And sometimes it makes me a little nervous because it's telling me to do something that I really didn't want to do. And so the fullness of the gospel, I think, is something we get tied up in. We get tired after a while of trying to figure out if it's what I'm doing in line with what the Lord has said so far, or am I off on another tangent? It's easy to figure out that the only problems with the churches of today is all the people. You just kick all the people out, and the church would be perfect. But it is, all of us are trying to learn how to treat each other with respect, whether we agree with the particular point of view that another person has, or their point of view, even though it's valid, it isn't something that we can relate to. But I just don't think we even come close to seeing the fullness of the gospel, because we're talking to the Lord all the time. And so therefore it doesn't matter to me if the Bible and the Book of Mormon are the fullness of the gospel in terms of has everything in there anybody would need, because there are times when the Lord tailors it to my experience and decides to take me to task personally. And so whether I'm getting a pat on the back or I'm out at the woodshed, depends on me and how I follow through with what I do know. Well, I'll let you go. You guys have a response to that. I don't know, but
well, I would like to respond, Monty. I thank you for a beautiful summation statement that has gotten people smiling all across the screen, and that sounds like a good place to wrap it up to me. And so we are at 9:45, and therefore it's for those of us that have work tomorrow, it's probably a time to close anyway. So good night, the Lord is watching o'er you. Good night, his blessings go before you. Good night, and we'll be praying for you. So good night, may God bless you. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, you're welcome to. Oh, Kathy has a hand up.
Yes. Did Monty marry that girl?
Yeah.
Monty, are you still there?
Did you marry?
Yeah, he's still here.
Okay.
Yeah. You marry that girl or somebody?
that girl turned out to be engaged to a guy in the service, and so